the bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here, alongside Katie Greifeld and Scarlet Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell. And guys, we talk about sort of all the importance of what we just heard out of Jay Powell and the Fed. Obviously, no change in rates here, but I think the communication seemed to fit with what has already been the unfolding market narrative.
What people had priced in already, and they got confirmation of that, which is the rise in yields has done a lot of the Fed's work for it, maybe even all of the rest of the work for it.
But then you take a look at how fickle, of course, that narrative is. You look at 10-year yields down about 17 basis points today. Obviously, the rise so far has tightened financial conditions, but how sustainable that is a question.
All right, let's bring into the conversation our friends Carol Massar and Tim Stenovic from Bloomberg Radio as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms here. And excuse me, Mike Regan filling in today for Tim Stenovic. Carol, what did you make of what we heard today?
I felt like it was a lot more of a hawkish tone. I'm just kind of writing some of the notes. You know, Jay Powell saying the key question is inflation still cooling? He's worried about the risks of doing too little. Inflation remains elevated. Amanda Gotti, who we just talked to over at PNC, she says, I am discounting the trade today. She goes, the sentiment going into this Fed decision was pretty lousy at this point. So there's definitely some repositioning going on. And she says the door is definitely open for more rate hikes. The question is, and this is something we're going to have to watch over the next couple of weeks into that final Fed meeting of the year, is whether or not the market continues to do some of the Fed's work, which is something Romaine, Jay Powell certainly addressed.
Yeah, obviously a big focus on what we heard out of Jay Powell and the Fed. We should point out, too, we are getting quite a few earnings coming after the bell tonight, including from Qualcomm, DoorDash, Airbnb, Zillow, PayPal, and a few others. So sit tight here. We have a lot that we have to parse here over the next hour or so. Meanwhile, we get the closing bells here in New York. The Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by about 0.8% here on the day. The S&P 500 going to close higher by about 1% here on the day, while the Nasdaq Composite higher by 1.6%, and the Russell 2000 getting in on the action. It's your relative laggard, guys, but still managing to close it out up about 0.5%.
All right, folks, do we want to do Qualcomm? Let's go to it. Let's get to the outlook, because I think that's the red sticky. First quarter adjusted EPS, $2.25 to $2.45. So, guys, they are bumping this up. The street estimate is for $2.25 a share. So, again, the outlook moving to the upside. First quarter revenue, they're looking at $9.1 billion to $9.9. That, too, the upside potential, definitely above what the street is expecting. They're looking for $9.25 billion. Again, first quarter adjusted EPS, Scarlet, $2.25 to $2.45, and we're taking a look at Qualcomm in the aftermarket. It's up about 2.7%. Stock's been off about fractionally so far this year.
And keep in mind that Qualcomm shares have underperformed the rest of the semiconductor stocks so far, and we are seeing semiconductor stocks lead the gains today. We've heard really encouraging numbers out of Intel, out of AMD over this earnings period. So this just adds to that idea that the inventory overhang we've gotten in semiconductors seems to be clearing.
Yeah, and a big gain in the QQQ, the NASDAQ 100 index ETF today, up about 1.7%. We are seeing that extend in the after-hour trades as people digest this Qualcomm news, Katie. So maybe there is some fuel for this rally to continue tomorrow.
And it's interesting to sort of pull out what this means for the industry overall. Of course, you think about the mobile phone industry's inventory glut. You see these Qualcomm numbers. Maybe that's a sign that that's starting to improve. But, you know, you take a look at the share reaction. It's not too huge here. Again, 2-3% higher. It's going to be interesting, of course, as always, to hear what the executives have to say, because obviously a big upgrade to that outlook.
Yeah, a big upgrade to that outlook. And are we going to hear something similar out of some of the other names? Obviously not the same industries here, but as you get that cross section here and try to get a read on whether those economic conditions, like Jay Powell said, are supportive of the Fed's current stance, that question still open.
Well, remember Qualcomm, right? A great indicator in terms of what's going on in the smartphone market, which is definitely off some of its highs that we've seen, you know, a few years ago, if you will. And so we're watching. Are the
phones still smart? I mean, if every phone is a smartphone.
Smarter phone? Smarter phone? I don't know.
We also have earnings out from Airbnb. Why don't we hit that one, because that's a red sticky if I've seen one. Fourth quarter revenue, this is a forecast here of $2.13 billion to $2.17 billion. The consensus estimate is $2.18 billion, so that looks like a bit of a miss here for Airbnb. So Airbnb coming out with a forecast that doesn't look as encouraging as maybe investors had expected. As for the third quarter, the quarter that ended, revenue was $3.4 billion, slightly higher than what analysts had anticipated, $3.37 billion. Nights and experience booked totaled about $113.2 million. Analysts are looking for $112.9. I don't know what nights and experiences booked is. That must be a new segment of their business. Gross booking value.
Well, that's actually
Bookings,
an interesting one
is it?
because
It's a small amount, though.
Well, they're sort of splitting out the longer term folks from the people who actually did, I guess, what Airbnb was originally intended to be, which was for those overnight stays. But of course, we know a lot of these quote unquote work from home people seem to be permanently work from home.
Stock's been on a tear.
We don't know who those people are.
I do. Can I name a few?
In any case, you can see the shares of Airbnb bouncing around after hours, currently down about 3%. But this is also a case of this stock was up, what, 40% coming into tonight's results. So high expectations, and that's been the story for a lot of some of these companies that we're seeing that are still sitting on pretty sizable rallies year to date. That raises the stakes for the numbers, and we know this has been a punishing market.
Yeah. 8% of the float, too, is shorted, so, you know, if there's any kind of disappointment.
Yeah. Big rally going on in Roku, too, after they reported revenue that beat estimates, and that fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA at $10 million compared to a loss estimate from analysts of $57.6 million. So big gain in Roku after those numbers, Romaine.
Yeah, up about 11%, one of the biggest gainers that we're seeing here in after-hours trading. But we talk about this idea here of where the money is going to go and the sort of the flip-flop through, I guess, what some people think is essential and what some people think is discretionary here. And even just to go back to Airbnb, I mean, part of this is about that growth rate in revenue and bookings, which are still in the double digits. But we're talking about a year ago, you know, those double digits were something like 50% a quarter, and now we're down into the teens in terms of percent increases.
Hey, here's a little color, too, from Airbnb. That disappointing outlook, as we know, for the fourth quarter. They cited greater volatility in the economic environment that expects will slow demand for travel after a record summer season. And this could be a part, maybe, or the beginning of that experiential engine that has really been supporting economic growth. Could we start to see that slow down a little bit?
All right, we also have numbers out of DoorDash as well. Let's go to the forecast here. It sees fourth quarter gross order value of $17 billion to $17.4 billion. Analysts were looking for $16.35 billion. So that is certainly more encouraging than what the consensus estimate is right now. In terms of the third quarter that ended, revenue of $2.16 billion, slightly higher than the consensus estimate. You could see the stock moving up more than 4% in after-hours trade.
And part of the reason why is that's actually its strongest quarter since it went public in 2020. That is record revenue and orders. Its narrowest loss as well. Markets clearly rewarding that after hours. So again, you look at the economic environment, how it's affecting Airbnb, but people obviously still ordering food and getting it delivered directly to their door.
Guilty as charged. All right, let's go to Mondelez, also out with their earnings after the close here. Third quarter net revenue, it's a beat, folks. It's $9.03 billion. The estimate on the street was $8.83 billion. Third quarter adjusted EPS, 82 cents a share. That's coming in 3 pennies better than what the street was forecasting. Adjusted operating margin, 16.7%. That too is a beat. The estimate was 16.1, and adjusted gross margin was 38.6. Also, more than a full percentage point better. The estimate on the street was 37.4%. But Mondelez, we're just seeing it move up about 0.4% in the after hour, and the stock is little change year to date.
Yeah, decent organic growth here, and the forecast also saying that that'll continue. Interesting also that the press release, at least that I can see, not making any mention of all of the craze regarding these GLP-1 weight loss drugs. But of course, that could change on the conference call, as I'm sure the CEO and the CFO are going to be asked specifically that question.
Yeah, Zillow up a little bit, too, after they reported revenue $496 million for the third quarter, above the estimate of $480.8 million. Remember, they really got hit yesterday on that real estate investigation on commissions, so a little bit of a rebound from that today. Scarlett?
Yeah, the CEO and co-founder of Zillow, Rich Barton, says despite a residential real estate industry that's down 14% from last year, Zillow, and he's patting himself on the back here, reporting positive growth, mentioning that 3% in total revenue, 30% 34% in rentals income, and a much bigger increase, 88% in purchase mortgage origination business. So citing some strong momentum. But yeah, the ruling yesterday is certainly putting a damper on any kind of gains that Zillow is attempting to make here, which might explain the tepid 1.3% rise right now.
All right, for all of you who love Etsy, who doesn't love Etsy, their earnings are just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA margin, 26 to 27%. That's a little light, 27.8%, or could be perceived as light. This is the outlook that the company is putting out there. Fourth quarter take rate, about 20.8%. That is just above the estimate of 20.7. Call it just about in line. And go back to the third quarter, the last quarter they just reported. Third quarter EPS, 64 cents. That's 14 cents better than what the street was forecasting. And third quarter revenue, $636.3 million. The estimate was for $630.9 million. So that is a beat, but the stock not loving the outlook maybe. What? I don't know.
That growth number is pretty bad here. I mean, you're talking about on gross merchandise only up about 1% here year over year. And even when you take total revenue, you're down back into the mid-single digits here. So maybe that is partly a reason why you're seeing the downdraft in the shares.
Yeah, and you take a look, coming into this report, this stock is down, what, 50% year to date? And it's always interesting to look at the sell side picture after that. It still has 16 buys, 14 holds, only 3 sells on Etsy after the terrible year that it's having.
Well, it had a banner year, I believe, in 2022. So it gave back a lot of those gains.
Yeah.
But now the pressure's on for Etsy to deliver over the holiday season. Is it a discretionary website or is it more of an essential? We'll find out.
I don't know. All right. Anyway, we'll watch, and it'll be interesting too, the analyst calls and also the analyst reactions and whether or not they do any changes in terms of calls on the stocks or target changes. All right, guys, that's a wrap for our Fed Wednesday simulcast and also some earnings flow on radio, TV, YouTube, and of course Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again tomorrow.